More unused type combinations! Welcome back to the Croneo region, my Fakemon region based on Scotland and just a touch of Canada. Last time I showed 8 of them, and then 6 of them actually happened in Scarlet and Violet. Today I will show my ideas that could occupy the remaining 7. Let's start off with a regional variant. Fairy Fire is one of the most imaginative type combinations for Fakemon creators, but I can't do a region based on Scotland without doing a Will-O-the-Wisp Pokemon. Mythological creatures from across the world, but particularly in Scotland. They're portrayed as very Celtic in pop culture, so it just makes sense. Will-O-the-Wisps are fire fairies, which makes the combo obvious, much like Ghost Fire due to them being spirits. So I thought of Litwick. I mean, the line-learned Will-O-Wisp have prominent fire motifs in their designs and even have dex entries with behaviours similar to the myth, so why not make it a full-on Will-O-the-Wisp? Here's Croneo and Litwick. It's a full-blown Will-O-the-Wisp. Yeah, they appear as just a flame. I love how it's very different to the original line, but captures the essence of what a Litwick is. I also love how the hair changed from melted wax to a wispy fire. Will-O-the-Wisps are just ghostly fire spirits, so I removed the candle. I like to think this was the original Litwick variant, but some rogue Litwicks possessed candles and proceeded to feed on life essence. These Litwick aren't that greedy, but they do still lure travellers to their doom. They're like little fey tricksters, much like the Impidimp line, so I feel the fairy type works here. To evolve Unova Litwick, you needed to make it reach the absurdly high level 41. Lampent isn't that much stronger than a base form starter, so to make it still difficult yet possible to obtain at an earlier point in the game, you evolve Croneo Litwick via high friendship into Croneo Lampent, which is a torch. So instead of guiding travellers to their doom, it can help guide the trainer's way through dark places, especially since it can deal with dark types due to the fairy typing. But wild ones are still as evil and mischievous as they were before. But why is this a torch? A few reasons actually. The wisp part of the term means bundle of sticks, or paper sometimes used as a torch. For those curious, the will part is just the name Will. Same as how jack-o'-lanterns come from the name Jack, since they're derived from the same story. I also based Croneo Lampent on Link Boys, who were just boys who carried torches to help pedestrians for a fee. That was a real job. In the Scottish Highlands, Will-O-the-Wisps were believed to take the form of Link Boys in order to further lure people to their dooms. There's also an image of Cupid as a Link Boy, which in my opinion furthers the fairy type connection due to Cupid's connotations with love, as well as the angel wings he possesses. That's why there's an allusion to angel wings in the design. Since Unova Lampent evolves via a Duskstone, I felt it would only make sense for this variant to evolve via a Dawnstone. Here's Croneo Chandelure. It still appears to be a chandelier, as well as keeping the fiery elements. But why does it look like, well, that? It's actually meant to be a lighthouse. Yes, you heard me correctly, a lighthouse. Will-O-the-Wisps, or Spunkies as they're known in the Highlands, were blamed for some shipwrecks, as they had been known to be mistaken for harbour lights. I generalised this to lighthouses, as I feel this would make for an interesting design. Both Lampent and Chandelure have white structures which encase their bodies. This is because I wanted them to seem more pure, due to the fairy type, but they're still just as malevolent as their Unovan counterparts, which applies to Litwick too. Their shinies do reference the original colour schemes after all, and they share the same abilities, apart from Flashfire, which is now my new ability, Spectre, which gives them Ghost-type Stab, due to the Will-O-the-Wisp's ties with death and the spirit world. I mean, they are spirits who tried to kill you after all. Souls of the dead who want to add more to their numbers. I guess you could say these are also angels of death. Also, this line is the ace of the fire-type gym leader, Charlotte. Now how about the fairy ground type? This was a hard one. But dirtiness has connections to the ground, and here's a Scottish fairy creature that does a lot of household cleaning. The brownie. Brownies are a kind of dessert too, but as much as I like the idea of a brownie, I don't think there's quite enough to it to work as a whole design. But then again, the cleaning profession tends to use sponges, and a sponge is another kind of cake, and plenty of other fairy-type Pokemon are based on food. And so, meet Spongy! The name comes from sponge and brownie. Spongy are kitchen sponges who like to wriggle on the floor and eat dirt. Literally, they transform the dirt into sugary goodness based on Scottish tablet, a Scottish candy. These cubes of tablet would be used as projectiles, and yes, its mouth is on the underside because that's how it eats dirt. Bakers like to have these little guys around, as they keep the place clean and produce delicious edible treats. Now there's actually 2 ways Spongy can evolve, either at the Mud Springs location, just how you would get Croneo Abominable, or by using a fairy charge on the special rod. Check out the video in the iCard if you want to know more about that. But if either of these conditions are met at level 40 or higher, Spongy will evolve into Croneo. The name comes from Cronacan, sponge, Fae, and Porifera, the phylum sea sponges are a part of. Cronacan is another kind of dessert in Scotland made of raspberries with cream, oatmeal, honey, and whiskey. And this cylindrical shape of this specific Cronacan reminded me of the cylindrical shape of the stovepipe sponge. Scotland doesn't have the stovepipe sponge to my knowledge, but sponges can actually be found here, even if they're rare. I kinda smushed these ideas together, hence the weird colour scheme in Spongy. It also looks like it has a cane, almost like a granny, which is a pun on Granny, a sea anemone from the Victorian era who was cared for by scientists in Edinburgh, and was, quote, arguably the most famous and celebrated Cnidarian of all time. I know sea anemones and sea sponges are different, but I thought it would be a fun reference, considering that they have similar vibes. But also, grannies are known for baking and stuff. Plus, sea anemones are found across the British Isles, so that works out. It still does the same cleaning, and still uses dirt as fuel for its attacks. Ice poison is another difficult type combination to figure out. Doing something poisonous but also frozen makes sense, but I never felt this would be inspiring. But then someone suggested to me that perhaps a hollyberry would work. No, not halleberry, a hollyberry. You know, the sorts of things that you put on Christmas wreaths? Ice works because of its ties to Christmas, and by extension winter, the season in the Northern Hemisphere that the holiday is celebrated. And poison works because these berries are poisonous. Then I thought of making it a regional variant of a berry Pokemon. Meet Croneo Cherubi, which is based on hollyberries and mistletoes. It does evolve into Croneo Cherim, but if you recall, Cherim has two forms, Overcast and Sunshine. Since Galarian Darmanitan translated the Zen mode form, I don't see why I shouldn't adapt these forms as well as their ability, Flower Gift. So now, Croneo Cherim has a hibernation form, as many creatures hibernate during the winter. Even though this Pokemon likes the cold, but I'll get into that when talking about its ability. And also, a holiday form. Kinda a pun on Holly and Holiday, as well as on the move Sunny Day. From Gen 5 onwards, the form change was tied to Flower Gift, so I'm going to do the same here with the Cronean ability, Holiday Gift. It also has the same effect of boosting all Pokemon in the party's attack and special defense by 1.5 times, except this time in hail instead of sunlight. The only other change is that the Cherim with this ability will not have a 1.5 times buff when it's in Holiday form, but a 2 times buff. Considering I made the stat spread make more use of Flower Gift to begin with, this addition to Holiday Gift makes Croneo Cherim pack an astonishingly mean Ice Punch. I hope their typing comes across in this concept, even if admittedly it doesn't look like what its type is. But hey, I like the idea and I think it's unique. Speaking of unique, a group of Pokemon which aren't are the Mimic Pokemon. I don't mean Ditto or Zorua, but I do mean Pokemon who fulfill the role of a mimic from traditional RPGs. Enemies who disguise themselves as item chests. Pokemon's equivalent of chests are Pokeball sprites and models in the overworld, so it's only natural for some Pokemon equivalents of mimic enemies to look like them. I realised none of these were in my list of returning Pokemon, so I decided to make my own. Meet Gulforb. The name comes from Gulf and Orb, a spherical object which golf balls and Pokeballs are. If the name sounds similar to another Mimic Pokemon, that's intentional. With the release of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, I thought it would make sense if I had this Pokemon be to Voltorb similar to what Wiglet is to Diglett. It was difficult to try and make this look different to Voltorb while making it similar enough, but I think it works. The lore is that this Pokemon had a common ancestor with the likes of Geodude and Roggenrola, and ended up as a spherical and somewhat squishy rock life form. But when trainers kept throwing Pokeballs and items in the overworld looked like Pokeballs, it started to adapt by changing its external colours to mimic said balls, similar to how peppered moths adapted to differently coloured tree bark during industrial times. This Pokemon is based on golf balls, you see, and the way they spread their species is by being hit to a faraway place, and it thinks Pokeballs are where they are for similar reasons. Hence why they adapted, because they thought it would give them an evolutionary advantage, when in reality it doesn't. Speaking of evolution, Gulforb doesn't evolve. It's a single stage. Even if you don't think this deserves to be a true convergent species, I think it's hard to deny that the name still makes sense. So, golf. Why? Scotland invented it, and it's our national sport. There are plenty of golf courses throughout Scotland, most famously at St Andrews, the town which was the birthplace of the sport, and most infamously a golf course in Aberdeenshire belonging to a former president of the United States. Said former president totally not inspiring the appearance and name of the normal type gym leader Donnie, whose ace is a golf orb. Yeah. So why normal? Rock kinda does make sense due to how hard they are, but surely it would make sense for it to be a mono rock type? I disagree. Remember how I said golf balls were kinda squishy? That's how they're able to be hit as far as they are. They're made of rubber covered in a polymer which ends up being rock solid, unless enough pressure is applied, i.e. via a golf club being swung hard and fast, which squishes it ever so slightly, which gives it a bit of a boost. Normal types tend to be squishy, that's my logic. Also, one last thing. This is one of those mon that has many forms. The mimic is a gimmick. Not only did I want it to mimic items, but overall TMs too, because I'm evil. So there's a yellow form, but I wanted other balls to be referenced, such as the Premier Ball that Donnie uses, the Great and Ultra Balls that people have been wanting Voltorb and Electrode to evolve into, the Dusk Ball, which works really well in caves where this Pokemon has its roots, and the Master Ball, just as a rare treat. Sticking to the rock theme, I'm gonna cut to the chase with Ghost Rock. These are Coronian Sandygast and Coronian Palisand. Haunted castles, though Sandygast is actually based on Brocks, which are Iron Age drystone hollow-walled structures found in Scotland. They appear similar, though are obviously much smaller, so perfect for Sandygast. As for Palisand, it's a castle now. To convey the hauntedness of it, it has a more spooky look to it. Oh yeah, these are haunted Brocks and castles. Haunted castles are a common trope, and I feel like making it into a Pokemon isn't too much of a stretch. But how are castles Scottish? Said no one who's watched those wizard movies, considering the castles there were filmed in Scotland. Not only that, Scotland has over 1,000 castles. I don't think you've noticed, but we're not a big country. More people live in London, England than the entirety of Scotland. We don't need this many castles. All of this backs up why, if you know anything about Scotland, you're not that surprised I made these two into castles. Well, a Brock and a castle. They're different. Also, they'd be much bigger than their Alolan counterparts. Bug Dragon is a no-brainer, isn't it? Dragonfly. But what if I don't do the obvious? So, what can a Bug Dragon be? Well, a bug for starts. But dragon? Dragon types tend to be aggressive looking with a few exceptions. They give the vibes of myths and legends, and are the arcane sorcery type. Midges seem aggressive when they bite and come from Scotland. They're tiny creatures that swarm in a group, as does the Gigalorum myth, which are the smallest possible bug. That made me think about what the smallest possible thing to exist is. An atom? Well, atoms are made from protons, neutrons, and electrons, so subatomic things do exist. That made me think of Marvel and how Ant-Man can go subatomic with science. And since science and magic are kind of the same thing in Marvel, let's say this bug Pokemon, based on midges and the Gigalorum, uses arcane sorcery to go subatomic, but also swarm together cause they're midges. Meet Gigaligia. The name comes from Gigalorum, Midge, and Militia, since I feel like that works given the Midge inspiration. It's tiny and annoying, just like midges. It's a single stage mon, but it's not very strong, only a 270 base stat total. But as I said, it can use the arcane power of the dragon type to shrink down and become subatomic, and join a militia of its kind to enter its swarm form. As you can see, it does the same thing as Wishy-Washy. The difference is it's stronger. It is a dragon type after all. Jay, the artist, gave it more shark-like elements to make it appear more like a dragon type. It's unknown how many Gigaligia are in the swarm form, since they become infinitesimally small. It's in this form when above 25%, just like Wishy-Washy, except at level 25 or over instead of level 20 or over. Speaking of bug types, according to all known laws of aviation, there is no way a bee should be able to fly. Its wings are too small to get its fat little body off the ground. The bee, of course, flies anyway, because bees don't care what humans think is impossible. Especially when that bee is a Snorlax? So after going through many ideas for a normal bug type, I settled on a non-insect animal, since that's interesting. Preferably one that would suit the normal type, have an addiction to honey, and then gain the bug type upon evolution. Munchlax is a normal type with infamous connections to honey, and waiting. a lot of waiting. But honey is what's relevant here, so I decided to put honey on Snorlax and make it more bug-like. And now it's a bee, all because Munchlax ate too much Cronian honey. So that's one Pokemon line for every unused type combination. What did you think? Do you think these concepts fit the typing? Do you think they fit the region? What would you have done? And what do you think is going to be done next? Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and ring the notification bell. Check out the Croneo Region's Instagram as well as my Patreon page if you want to support the series. And I'll see you next time for a video dedicated to regional variants.